The Galactic Council Chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of pure crystal and light. 10,000 seats rose in circular tiers around a central platform, each one occupied by representatives from species that had ruled the stars for millions of years. The ceiling displayed the real-time positions of every inhabited world in the known galaxy. Over 400,000 glowing points of civilization dot into this overwhelming display of power walked a single human delegation. Ambassador Lydia Vance led her small team across the platform, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. She could feel 40,000 eyes studying her, analyzing her, dismissing her. Humanity had only discovered faster-than-light travel 18 months ago. To these ancient beings, her entire species was nothing more than clever animals who had stumbled upon technology they could not possibly understand. The supreme arbiter, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline form, spoke first. Its voice resonated through every translator in the chamber. The Galactic Council recognizes the presence of the Terran delegation. You have requested emergency consideration for admission to Council affairs. Speak your purpose. Lydia stepped forward. Her heart was pounding, but her voice remained steady. Honored members of the Council, humanity comes not to beg for acceptance, but to offer something no other species has provided in over 10,000 years. A ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. Several delegates laughed openly. And what could a species that discovered fire merely moments ago possibly offer the Galactic Council? Asked the Velaran representative, a massive being covered in armored plates. Lydia smiled. It was not a nervous smile. We offer you a child. The laughter stopped. On the far side of the galaxy, 12-year-old Marcus Webb stood at the entrance of the most prestigious military academy in existence. Korath Station had trained warriors and commanders for 3,000 years. Its graduates had shaped the fate of empires and decided the outcomes of wars that spanned entire star systems. No human had ever been permitted through its doors. Until today. Director Thal, a reptilian creature with scales the color of deep space, watched the human child approach with barely hidden contempt. Behind him, his senior instructors gathered in clusters, their various forms radiating amusement and mockery. Remind me why we accepted this application, whispered Instructor Kellax, her bioluminescent skin flickering with derision. Thal's lipless mouth curved upward. The human ambassador made quite the speech before the Galactic Council. Something about proving humanity's worth through the ancient tradition of military education. The Council found it amusing enough to approve. Besides, our failure rate for first-year cadets is 93%. The child will wash out within a week. The airlock hissed open. Marcus stepped through. He was small, even by human standards. Brown hair fell messily across his forehead, and his eyes seemed too large for his face. He carried only a single bag and wore clothes that had clearly been mended several times. The instructors exchanged glances. A massive four-armed Velari cadet standing nearby leaned toward his companion and made a comment that sent them both into fits of laughter. Marcus looked around the docking bay. He took in the alien faces, the strange architecture, the obvious hatred directed at him. His expression remained completely calm. Director Thal stepped forward, deliberately speaking in the most complex dialect of galactic standard. It was a language that took most species years to master. Cadet Webb, welcome to Korath Academy. You will report to Barracks 12. Training begins at dawn. Questions? The instructors waited for confusion, for tears, for the child to break down and beg to return home. Instead, Marcus responded in the same dialect. His pronunciation was flawless. Only one, Director. Where is the Combat Simulation Center? I would like to study the equipment before training begins. The laughter died instantly. Director Thal stared at the small human for a very long moment. Something cold moved through his chest. It felt disturbingly like doubt. Over the following 3 weeks, Marcus Webb did not wash out. He was the smallest cadet in his group, the weakest physically, the slowest in every race. During combat drills, he was thrown to the ground, pinned, and defeated by every single opponent he faced. But every time he fell, he got back up. The Velari who had laughed at him on the first day was a cadet named Draco. He made it his personal mission to destroy the human. Every morning before training, he would corner Marcus in the barracks hallway. "Go home, little Namel," Draco would growl, slamming Marcus against the wall. "You do not belong here. Your species was crawling through mud while we were building empires among the stars." Marcus never fought back, never reported the attacks. He simply picked himself up, brushed off his uniform, and walked to training. What Draco did not notice was that Marcus was watching. Every fight he lost, his eyes tracked movements. Every lecture, he asked questions that made instructors pause. Every tactical simulation, he studied the patterns of everyone around him. He was learning. On the 22nd day, everything changed. The monthly combat assessment placed cadets in teams of 5 for simulated battle scenarios. These exercises tested combat awareness, tactical thinking, and leadership potential. Marcus was assigned to the worst squad in the academy. 3 of his teammates came from low-gravity worlds and struggled with physical combat. The 4th was a small insectoid named Tick, who had been marked for removal due to insufficient aggression. Their opponents were Draco's squad, the highest-ranked team in the entire academy. The match was expected to last less than 2 minutes. Director Thal watched from the observation deck, mildly curious to see how badly the human would fail. The simulation began. Marcus gathered his team and spoke quietly, pointing at different positions on the holographic terrain map. Teak clicked nervously. The others looked doubtful, but they listened. Draco's squad charged forward in their standard, aggressive formation. They never saw what was coming. Within 90 seconds, all 5 of them had been eliminated. Marcus's squad had not lost a single member. Director Thal leaned forward, his scales rippling with shock. "Play it back," he ordered. The technicians replayed the match. Thal watched Marcus position his weakest fighters in locations that perfectly exploited the terrain. He watched the human predict exactly where Draco's squad would move, funneling them into devastating crossfire. He watched a 12-year-old child execute military strategy that most senior cadets could never master. "Director," Kallax said slowly, "that was a Corvin encirclement. That technique is not taught until the 3rd year of training." Thal said nothing. That night, a classified message arrived on his private terminal. It came from the Galactic Intelligence Bureau with the highest possible security clearance. Thal opened it and read Marcus Webb, age 12. Earthworld, Earth. Commander David Webb, Terran Special Operations. Status: killed during the Fringe conflict. Mother: Dr. Anna Webb, Terran Military Intelligence. Status: killed during the Fringe conflict, guardianship, transferred to Terran military. Development program. Special notes: subject demonstrates exceptional pattern recognition and strategic capability. Recommended for advanced observation. Warning: subject shows signs of extreme tactical adaptability. Monitor with caution. Thal read the file 3 times. Then he looked out his window, toward the barracks where a human child was sleeping. "What have the Terrans truly sent us?" He whispered across the station. Marcus Webb lay awake in his bunk. His eyes were open, staring at the dark ceiling above him. He was not thinking about his victory. He was thinking about everything that would come next. And somewhere in that darkness, a small smile crossed his face. It was not the smile of a child. It was the smile of someone who had been planning this moment for a very long time. 2 months had passed since the Galactic Council approved humanity's unusual request. In the Great Chamber, where 40,000 representatives gathered to govern the known universe, whispers had begun to spread. Strange reports were filtering in from Korath Station. Reports that should have been impossible. Ambassador Lydia Vance stood before the council once more, but this time she was not alone. Behind her, a holographic display showed tactical footage that made even the oldest delegates lean forward in their seats. "What trickery is this?" demanded the Velaran representative, his armored plates shifting with agitation. Lydia's expression remained perfectly calm. "No trickery, honored representative. Simply results." On the display, a small human figure moved through a combat simulation with devastating precision. Opponents 3 times his size fell before strategies they could not comprehend. Patterns emerged that the galaxy's greatest military minds had never seen before. Arbiter's crystalline form pulsed with light. "The child has been at the Academy for only 2 months. These results are unprecedented. They are only the beginning," Lydia said and across the stars. Her words were proving true at Korath Station. Commander Yara watched Marcus Webb through the observation glass with growing unease. The human was in the training pit below, facing an opponent that should have crushed him in seconds. His opponent was called Stone, a silicon-based life form whose crystalline body could resist energy weapons and physical strikes alike. Stone had never lost a training match in 4 years at the Academy. The fight had been going on for 47 minutes. "He should have collapsed from exhaustion 30 minutes ago," Yara said to Director Thal, who stood beside her. "Humans require regular rest. Their muscles fatigue. Their bodies are fragile." "And yet," Thal replied quietly, below them, Marcus dodged another crushing blow. Sweat covered his skin. His breathing was heavy and labored, but his movements remained precise and controlled. He was not trying to win, Yara realized. He was learning. Every attack Stone made, Marcus studied. Every weakness in the crystalline form, he catalogued and filed away. "The other cadets have started calling him names," Yara said. "Some call him the Ghost. Others call him the Watcher." "And what do you call him?" Yara was silent for a long moment. "Dangerous. I call him Dangerous." The match ended in a draw. Marcus limped out of the training pit, his body covered in bruises and cuts. Stone remained behind, unmarked and undefeated. But as Marcus passed beneath the observation window, he looked up. Just for an instant, he could not possibly see through the one-way glass. It was technologically impossible, yet his eyes met Yara's perfectly. Ice spread through her chest. 1 week later, a new student arrived at Korath Academy. Her name was Elena Cross. She was 16, human, and unlike Marcus. She had not been sent as a symbolic gesture. She had been sent as a spy. Terran. Military intelligence had been monitoring Marcus's progress with increasing concern. A child who could defeat elite cadets. A child who could master alien combat systems in weeks. A child whose psychological profile suggested something far beyond normal human capability. They needed to understand what he was becoming. Elena was their answer. She found Marcus alone in the Academy's vast library on her 3rd day. He was reading, as always. The text on his screen was an ancient treatise on Velari military campaigns, written in a language that most universal translators could not process. "You are the famous human everyone whispers about," Elena said. Sliding into the seat across from him, Marcus did not look up from his reading. "And you are the spy they sent to watch me." Elena's carefully prepared cover story died on her lips. "How did you know?" She managed. Marcus turned a page. "Your uniform is regulation, but shows no wear. Your boots are new. You walked directly to this location without asking directions, which means you were briefed on my schedule. Your accent is from the Northern European Federation, but your file says you were raised in the Pacific Collective. The dialect patterns do not match. He finally looked up. His eyes were calm and ancient. Also, I accessed the Academy's communication logs this morning. Your handler has sent you 3 encrypted messages in the past day. Elena stared at him. She had trained with the best intelligence operatives in human space. She had fooled beings with centuries of experience. A 12-year-old had seen through her in moments. What are you? She whispered. Marcus smiled. It did not reach his eyes. I am what they made me. Before Elena could respond, alarms began screaming through the station. Red emergency lights flooded the library. Cadets everywhere scrambled toward defensive positions. Director Thal's voice echoed from every speaker. All cadets to combat stations. This is not a drill. Chorus Station is under attack. Elena jumped to her feet. Attack? By whom? Marcus was already moving toward the exit. The Iron Syndicate. 34 vessels. They entered the system through an unregistered jump point 11 minutes ago. Elena ran after him. How could you possibly know that? Because I have been tracking their movement patterns for 6 weeks. They were never random pirates. They are a coordinated military force. And they have come for the cadets. They burst out of the library into absolute chaos. Explosions shook the station. Cadets ran in every direction without purpose. Instructors shouted orders that were swallowed by the noise and confusion. In the center of the main corridor, Draco stood frozen in place. His 4 powerful arms hung limp at his sides. His eyes were wide with terror. The mighty Velari warrior who had tormented Marcus for months had never faced real combat. None of them had. Elena grabbed Marcus's arm. We need to reach the evacuation shuttles. Marcus shook his head. The shuttles will be destroyed within minutes of launch. The Syndicate positions strike craft along every escape route. Evacuation means death. Then what do we do? Marcus looked at the terrified cadets around him. At the burning debris falling from the ceiling. At the distant sounds of weapons fire as the station's defenses crumbled. Something shifted in his expression. A strange calm settled over his features. We fight. Elena stared at him in disbelief. You are 12 years old. Age is meaningless. Strategy is everything. He turned to the nearest group of cadets and raised his voice above the chaos. All of you, form on knee. Now. Draco sneered through his fear. Why should we follow you, human? An explosion tore through the eastern wall. 3 cadets were thrown to the ground. Smoke filled the air, thick and choking. When it cleared, Marcus was still standing. His uniform was torn. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead. But his voice did not shake. Because I am the only one here with a plan to survive this. Silence fell over the cadets. They looked at each other, at their instructors, who were nowhere to be seen, at the human child who stood before them like an unbreakable wall. Draco swallowed hard. Then, slowly, he dropped to one knee. What are your orders? Marcus looked at the 61 cadets who had gathered around him. Species from across the galaxy. Beings who had mocked him, hurt him, and dismissed him as worthless. Now they waited for him to save their lives. Follow me. Marcus said. And every single one of them did. The command center of Korath Station had fallen. Director. Thal lay motionless on the floor, his scales blackened by plasma fire. Around him were the bodies of 7 instructors. They had fought with courage and skill, but courage and skill had not been enough against overwhelming force. The Iron Syndicate's boarding parties moved through the station with brutal precision. They were not here for treasure or supplies. They were here for the cadets themselves. The children of the galaxy's most powerful families could be ransomed for wealth beyond. Imagination. Fleet Commander Voss watched the assault from his flagship, his scarred face twisted into a satisfied smile. His species had evolved to hunt in the darkness between stars, and his eyes gleamed with predatory hunger. "How long until the last resistance is crushed?" he asked. His lieutenant checked the tactical display. 30 minutes at most, Commander. The defenders have scattered. They have no leadership remaining. Excellent. Prepare the prisoner transports. Today we become the richest criminals in galactic history. Deep beneath the medical bay, in the maintenance tunnels that wound through the station like veins, Marcus Webb was teaching children how to wage war. "The enemy believes we are frightened and helpless," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Around him, 61 cadets crouched in the darkness, their faces lit by dim emergency lighting. "They expect us to hide, to scatter, to surrender. We will not give them what they expect." Draco shifted his massive body in the cramped tunnel. "We are outnumbered 8 to 1. They have military armor and weapons. We have training equipment and emergency tools." "Correct." Marcus pulled up a holographic map on his personal device. "Which is exactly why we will not face them directly. Not at first." Elena leaned closer, studying the map with trained eyes. "What are you planning?" "The Syndicate's strength comes from their coordination. Their squads operate in tight patterns, clearing one section after another. They communicate constantly through a closed network. They assume their equipment is superior to anything on this station." Marcus highlighted several points on the map. "But they do not know this station like we do. The tunnels, the service passages, the environmental systems. We have lived here for months. They have not." Teak, a small insectoid who had been Marcus's teammate in the first combat simulation, clicked nervously. "What can environmental systems do against armed soldiers?" Marcus looked at him. His expression was not friendly. "Everything." 23 minutes later, Commander Voss received the first troubling report. "Squad 7 is not responding." Voss turned toward his lieutenant. "Explain." "They were clearing the science section. Their last transmission was 12 minutes ago." Then silence. "Life signs have terminated." Voss felt something cold move through him. "Send Squad 14 to investigate." 14 minutes after that, Squad 14 stopped responding. Then Squad 3. Then Squad 20-1. Voss slammed his fist against the command console hard enough to crack the screen. "What is happening down there?" The tactical display flickered with error messages. Reports flooded in from across the station. Environmental systems were failing in random sectors. Gravity was fluctuating wildly in certain corridors. Lights were shutting down. Doors were sealing without warning. And in the darkness, his soldiers were dying. One squad reported a massive 4-armed creature bursting from a wall panel, crushing 2 soldiers before vanishing back into the shadows. Another reported small figures dropping from ceiling vents, attacking with makeshift weapons before disappearing. A third reported entering a cargo bay only to find gravity had been reversed, sending them crashing into the ceiling while gas flooded the room. "Commander," the lieutenant said slowly, his voice shaking, "the cadets are fighting back." Voss stared at the display. "Impossible. They are children." "Yes, Commander. They are." In the main training arena, Marcus Cord, the command center of Korath Station had fallen. Director Thal lay motionless on the floor, his scales blackened by plasma fire. Around him were the bodies of 7 instructors. They had fought with courage and skill, but courage and skill had not been enough against overwhelming force. The Iron Syndicate's boarding parties moved through the station with brutal precision. They were not here for treasure or supplies. They were here for the cadets themselves. The children of the galaxy's most powerful families could be ransomed for wealth beyond imagination. Fleet Commander Voss watched the assault from his flagship, his scarred face twisted into a satisfied smile. His species had evolved to hunt in the darkness between stars, and his eyes gleamed with predatory hunger. "How long until the last resistance is crushed?" he asked. His lieutenant checked the tactical display. 30 minutes at most, Commander. The defenders have scattered. They have no leadership remaining. Excellent. Prepare the prisoner transports. Today we become the richest criminals in galactic history. Deep beneath the medical bay, in the maintenance tunnels that wound through the station like veins, Marcus Webb was teaching children how to wage war. "The enemy believes we are frightened and helpless," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Around him, 61 cadets crouched in the darkness, their faces lit by dim emergency lighting. "They expect us to hide, to scatter, to surrender. We will not give them what they expect." Draco shifted his massive body in the cramped tunnel. "We are outnumbered 8-1. They have military armor and weapons. We have training equipment and emergency tools." "Correct." Marcus pulled up a holographic map on his personal device. "Which is exactly why we will not face them directly. Not at first." Elena leaned closer, studying the map with trained eyes. "What are you planning?" "The Syndicate's strength comes from their coordination. Their squads operate in tight patterns, clearing one section after another. They communicate constantly through a closed network. They assume their equipment is superior to anything on this station." Marcus highlighted several points on the map. "But they do not know this station like we do. The tunnels, the service passages, the environmental systems. We have lived here for months. They have not." Teak, the small insectoid who had been Marcus's teammate in the first combat simulation, clicked nervously. "What can environmental systems do against armed soldiers?" Marcus looked at him. His expression was not friendly. "Everything." 23 minutes later, Commander Voss received the first troubling report. "Squad 7 is not responding." Voss turned toward his lieutenant. "Explain." "They were clearing the science section. Their last transmission was 12 minutes ago." Then silence. "Life signs have terminated." Voss felt something cold move through him. "Send Squad 14 to investigate." 14 minutes after that, Squad 14 stopped responding. Then Squad 3, then Squad 21. Voss slammed his fist against the command console hard enough to crack the screen. "What is happening down there?" The tactical display flickered with error messages. Reports flooded in from across the station. Environmental systems were failing in random sectors. Gravity was fluctuating wildly in certain corridors. Lights were shutting down. Doors were sealing without warning. And in the darkness, his soldiers were dying. One squad reported a massive 4-armed creature bursting from a wall panel, crushing 2 soldiers before vanishing back into the shadows. Another reported small figures dropping from ceiling vents, attacking with makeshift weapons before disappearing. A third reported entering a cargo bay only to find gravity had been reversed, sending them crashing into the ceiling while gas flooded the room. "Commander," the lieutenant said slowly, his voice shaking, "the cadets are fighting back." Voss stared at the display. "Impossible. They are children." "Yes, Commander." "They are." In the main training arena, Marcus coordinated the defense like a conductor leading an orchestra of violence. He had divided his forces into 6 strike teams, each designed around their unique strengths. Draco led the assault group, using his natural power to engage enemies before retreating into the tunnels. Teak commanded the scouts, her small body able to reach spaces no other species could access. Elena handled communications, using her intelligence training to intercept enemy messages. And Marcus stood at the center of it all, seeing the battle like pieces moving across a game board. Team 3, patrol approaching Junction 7. Wait until they pass the vent hub, then trigger the pressure release. Team 5, reinforcements entering from the eastern dock. Fall back and activate the gravity trap at position 2. Team 1, I need a distraction in Sector 9. Draw their attention for 45 seconds, then vanish. His voice never wavered. His mind never stopped calculating. The cadets moved like ghosts through their own station, turning every corridor into a killing ground. They were not soldiers. They were students, children, but children who had been trained by the finest military academy in the galaxy. And now they had something they had never possessed before. A leader who saw everything. 3 hours into the battle, Commander Voss made a decision he had never thought possible. He ordered retreat. Pull back to the ships, he commanded, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. All units, immediate withdrawal. His lieutenants stared in disbelief. Commander, the mission ... The mission is over. We have lost 97 soldiers, 97 to children. Voss's hands trembled. Whoever is commanding their defense is no ordinary tactician. If we stay, we lose everything. The Iron Syndicate fled Korath Station. Their ships jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind the bodies of their dead. In the training arena, the surviving cadets stood in shocked silence. Against every possible odd, they had won. Draco looked at Marcus. The mighty Velari's 4 arms hung at his sides, covered in the dark blood of enemies he had killed. "How did you know?" he asked, his voice rough. "How did you know their patterns, their weaknesses, their frequencies?" Marcus was staring at the floor. His face was pale. The energy that had sustained him through the battle was fading, and the weight of what he had done was settling onto his young shoulders. "I have been preparing for this since I was 7 years old," he said quietly. "Since the day my parents died." Elena stepped forward. Marcus ... The Iron Syndicate killed them. Marcus continued, his voice flat and empty. "A raid on a human research outpost. My mother and father were executed when they refused to surrender military intelligence. I was hiding in a storage container. I saw everything. The arena fell completely silent. That day, I made myself a promise. I would never be helpless again. I studied every battle, every tactic, every enemy humanity had ever faced. I taught myself to see patterns that others could not see. To think 20 moves ahead, while everyone else was still on move 1. He looked up at the cadets surrounding him. I did not come to this academy to prove that humans were worthy. I came to learn how to destroy the enemies who took everything from me. Draco was the first to speak. The Syndicate will return, with more ships, more soldiers. Marcus nodded slowly. Yes, they will. And when they do? The human child looked toward the stars visible through the damaged windows. Somewhere out there, Commander Voss was already planning revenge. When they do, Marcus said, we will be ready. But even as he spoke, messages were racing across the galaxy at the speed of light. Reports of the battle at Korath Station spread like wildfire. Every news agency, military command, and intelligence service received the same impossible information. A human child had defeated the Iron Syndicate. In the throne room of the Velari Emperor, advisors whispered urgent warnings. In the war chambers of the Crystal Dominion, commanders replayed tactical footage with growing fear. And in the shadows of a hidden station, at the edge of known space, a figure known only as the Architect read the report with great interest. A human child, the Architect said softly, voice like grinding metal. How very fascinating. The Architect turned to a waiting servant. Find out everything about Marcus Webb, everything that exists. Across the galaxy, for the first time in 1,000 years, the great powers turned their full attention toward humanity. Not with contempt, not with amusement, with fear. If you do not interfere, why are you here? Because something is coming. The observer's glow dimmed. Something that has destroyed civilizations across 100 galaxies. Something that does not negotiate, does not retreat, does not understand mercy. It has been traveling toward this galaxy for eons. It will arrive within 1 standard year. The air in the ship seemed to grow colder. Why tell me this? Marcus asked. Why me? Because in all our endless observation, across all the species and civilizations we have witnessed, we have never encountered a mind like yours. The observer extended a translucent hand. You see what others cannot see. You adapt in ways that defy prediction. You turned mockery into legend in less than 5 months. The hand remained extended. We believe you may be the only being in this galaxy capable of doing what must be done. Marcus stared at the offered hand. Behind him, somewhere on the station, his friends waited anxiously for his return. The cadets who had fought beside him. The enemies who had become allies. The species that had dismissed his kind as primitive animals. What exactly are you asking me to do? He asked. The observer's form flickered with light. Lead? Lead what? Everything. Marcus felt the universe shift around him. Every lesson he had learned. Every moment of pain and isolation and quiet rage. Every night spent studying while other children slept. It had all led to this moment. He should have refused. He should have said he was only a child. He should have admitted that this burden was too great for anyone, let alone a 13-year-old orphan from a species the galaxy barely acknowledged. Instead, he looked at the observer with eyes that had already seen too much. Show me what we face. Show me everything. The observer brightened. As you wish. The walls of the ship dissolved, replaced by a vision of absolute horror. Stars dying. Worlds consumed. Entire civilizations erased in moments. A darkness that spread across the universe like a plague, leaving nothing behind but empty void. Somewhere behind that vision, Marcus heard screaming. He realized it was coming from the communication channel, from Elena and Draco and the others who were watching through his suit's cameras. Marcus did not scream. He watched the end of everything with eyes that never blinked. And in his mind, beneath the fear that any sane being would feel, something else began to form. Not despair, not surrender. A plan. The great chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so full. Every seat was occupied. Additional delegations crowded the observation galleries. Beings who had not left their homeworlds in centuries had traveled across the stars to be present. The supreme arbiters. Crystalline form pulsed with nervous energy as it surveyed the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. They had all come for one reason. To hear a 13-year-old human speak. Marcus Webb walked to the central platform alone. He wore no formal robes, carried no ceremonial weapons, displayed no symbols of rank or achievement. He was simply a small figure in a plain uniform, standing before the combined might of 100,000 worlds. The chamber fell silent. Thank you for coming, Marcus said. His voice was amplified to reach every corner of the vast space. I know many of you traveled great distances. I know some of you came only to see if the stories were true. I know others came hoping to watch me fail. He paused. All of that is acceptable. I only ask that you listen. He activated the central display, and the horror the observers had shown him filled the chamber. Gasps erupted from every direction. Delegates cried out in languages that had no translation for what they were seeing. Some covered their eyes. Others simply stared in frozen disbelief. The approaching threat was called the Silence. It was not an army. It was not even truly alive in any way the galaxy understood. It was a force of pure destruction, a wave of annihilation that converted everything it touched into more of itself. Stars were extinguished. Planets were consumed. Species that had existed for millions of years were erased without trace. This is what comes for us, Marcus said. This cannot be bribed, cannot be reasoned with, cannot be appeased. It can only be stopped. The Velaran delegate spoke first, his voice shaking. And you believe you know how to stop this? A child who has lived barely more than a decade? I believe I see patterns that others cannot, Marcus replied. And in those patterns, I see a possibility. He changed the display. Strategic projections filled the chamber. Fleet movements, resource allocations, precise mathematical calculations. The silence expands in specific configurations. It follows progressions that can be predicted with sufficient data. If we position our combined forces at these coordinates, at these exact moments, we can disrupt its advance. We cannot destroy it. Not yet. But we can fracture it into smaller segments that can be contained and eventually eliminated. The Crystal Dominion's war commander studied the projections with multiple eyes. This would require coordination beyond anything ever attempted. Every major power working in perfect synchronization. Yes, we have been enemies for millennia. Trust does not exist between us. Marcus nodded slowly. You are correct. Trust does not exist. But survival does not require trust. It requires understanding that the alternative is extinction. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings who had ruled empires, commanded fleets, and shaped the fate of worlds. I am not asking you to trust each other. I am asking you to trust mathematics. The calculations are precise. The strategy is sound. If we execute correctly, we survive. If we do not, everything we have ever built, everything we have ever loved, everything we have ever been, ends forever. Silence stretched through the hall. Then a figure rose in the gallery. It was Commander Voss of the Iron Syndicate, the same commander whose forces Marcus had defeated at Korath Station. His scarred face was unreadable. You destroyed my fleet, Voss said. Humiliated me before the entire galaxy. I swore vengeance against you. Marcus turned to face him directly. I remember. I have spent months studying how you did it. I consulted the greatest military minds in my organization. None of them could explain your tactics. Voss paused. I came here to find a weakness I could exploit. Instead, I found something else. He descended from the gallery and walked toward the central platform. Every eye in the chamber followed him. I found someone who sees what the rest of us cannot. Someone who led children into an army that defeated veterans. Someone who may be the only hope any of us have. Voss stopped before Marcus. The two stared at each other. Hunter and prey. Enemy and enemy. Then Voss dropped to one knee. I pledge my fleet and my forces to your command. Tell me where to fight, and I will fight. Tell me where to die, and I will die. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted protests. Others demanded explanations. But one by one, representatives began rising from their seats. The Velaran delegate descended and knelt. The Crystal Dominion's commander followed. Then the Trade Guild, the Religious Collective, the Scientific Alliance. One by one, the powers that had ruled the galaxy for millennia knelt before a human child, not in worship, not in surrender, in recognition. When the last delegate had knelt, Marcus looked out at the assembled might of galactic civilization, all of it now focused on him, waiting for his guidance. Then let us begin, he said. We have 10 months to save everything. I intend to use every moment. The summit that followed lasted for 14 days. Alliances that had seemed impossible were forged. Resources that had been hoarded for centuries were pledged to the common defense. Fleets began mobilizing toward the coordinates Marcus had specified. On the 15th day, as the delegates departed to prepare their forces, Elena found Marcus alone on the observation deck of the council station. He was staring at the stars, his expression distant and unreadable. "You did it," she said. "You united the entire galaxy." "I gave them a reason to unite," Marcus corrected. "Fear is a powerful force." "Is that all this is? Fear?" Marcus was silent for a long moment. "When I was 7 years old, I watched my parents die. I made myself a promise that day. I would never be helpless again. I would become strong enough to protect everyone I loved." He turned to face her. "I thought strength meant being alone, being untouchable, being so dangerous that no one could ever hurt me again." He gestured toward the viewport, toward the stars where fleets were already beginning to gather. "I was wrong. Strength is not about being alone. Strength is about bringing others together, giving them purpose, turning their fear into determination and their determination into action." Elena smiled softly. "You sound like a philosopher. I sound like a leader." Marcus looked at his hands, the hands of a child who had been forced to grow up far too quickly. "I never wanted to be one. I wanted to be a weapon, an instrument of vengeance against those who hurt me. But weapons cannot save a galaxy. And what can?" Marcus looked toward the distant light of stars that now depended on him. Billions of lives, countless worlds, the accumulated hope of 100,000 civilizations. "Someone willing to carry the weight," he said quietly. "Someone willing to become what they need." "And is that what you have become?" Marcus Webb, the child who had been enrolled as a joke, the orphan who had taught himself to see patterns in chaos, the boy who had grown into something the universe had never witnessed before, considered the question. "I have become what they needed," he said finally. "Now I must become what they deserve." In 10 months, the silence would arrive. In 10 months, the greatest battle in galactic history would begin, and at its center would stand a human child, carrying the hope of 1,000,000,000,000 souls on his shoulders. Somewhere in the depths of space, the observers watched with ancient eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. "Do you believe he can succeed?" one asked. "I do not know," another replied. "But for the first time in 1,000,000 years, I believe there is a chance." And across the galaxy, species that had never known unity prepared to fight as one. Not because they trusted each other, not because they had forgotten their ancient hatreds. Because a human child had shown them something they had lost. Hope. This was not the end of Marcus Webb's story. It was only the beginning.